Hey, what's up? This is Barbary, and this is the Gehirn Enterprise, or however you pronounce it, Benjolin. This is a big module from here in Australia that is effectively a Benjolin with some little modifications here and there and some tweaks on the circuit that I really enjoy. If you haven't seen a Benjolin before, it's a pretty nutso module. It's as an overview, it's got two oscillators which are normalized to cross-modulate each other using these two controls. So frequency up, cross-modulation from each. So as I turn that up, it would take the frequency of oscillator A and modulate oscillator B, and vice versa over here. So we've got some crazy cross-normalization. If you don't know what a Benjolin is, look it up. There's plenty of vids over there. So we've got two oscillators. They go through a filter, which is a multi-mode filter. You just have to pull the individual outputs from the different places here. Then this section called the Rungler, which is effectively a stepped random modulation source. Let me plug it in. I'll show you what's what. So I'm just using the combined output here. Got everything turned down. If I turn up oscillator A, open up the filter because it's normal to it, we get a big pulse wave modulation kind of sound. And that's because these two oscillators are fed into each other to get a PWM output. I don't know the science of it because I'm not a scientist, but yeah, try it out. Google it if you want to melt your brain a little bit, but effectively we can get that. You do have the independent outputs of triangle and pulse for each of the independent oscillators as well. There is a PWM output too and some other outputs. I'm just using the output that is normaled through this filter. Let's get some resonance. One of the additions that Gehirn Enterprises has made is there's a filter drive switch here with two different modes. Or I think it's three different modes, but they're different levels of amplification. The middle, I think, being cut off. I could be wrong. So this one, and then this one. I like this one. Just adds a bit of wow to it. Let's crank the res all the way up. And there it goes. Now there's a bit more interesting normalization to quickly discuss before I move on to the Rungler. First of all, and I think this is an addition to this module, and I haven't seen it in other Benjolins, although I could be wrong, let me know if I am, is here the frequency of the filter is normaled via this knob here to take the triangle wave of oscillator B. So it's set really low, so this will effectively function as an LFO if I turn this up. So let's bring in a little bit of filter, and then I'll turn up the sweep LFO if you want to think of it that way. Let's make it faster. Now we're not only hearing this sweeping the filter, but now we're actually starting to hear oscillator B, because these oscillators don't have a level output. It's just when they're turned all the way down, they're so slow that you can't hear them. But as they go up, you'll hear this modulate the filter and turn up the oscillator as well. Let's take that sweep modulation out. Now we've got the two oscillators. And already just mangling with the frequencies here on the oscillators, it can get pretty nuts. And it gets even more nutso when we start utilizing that idea that they can cross-modulate each other. So I'm going to turn oscillator B all the way down so we can just hear oscillator A. And as I turn up this control here, it will take the frequency of oscillator B and feed it into oscillator A. Here we go, we can hear it, and now speed it up. And again, now we're hearing both oscillators because there's no level control for them, but oscillator B is modulating the frequency of oscillator A. Now if I turn this up, oscillator A will modulate the frequency of oscillator B, so we get this madness kind of happen. So immediately, even just doing this, without even looking at this randomized section, it gets nuts. Let's bring in a bit of the filter with some resonance as well. Might feed in an LFO from out of sight here. I've just got a Peaks running a sine wave. Let's just modulate one of the inputs. And if we take that and we run it through some reverb or something like that, we can get a really interesting machine. I've got a Modbap Per4mer just out of sight. I'll just be randomly triggering a little bit of reverb on it. Back to the dry sound. All right, let's take that out. Bring the normalization back down. Let's just go one oscillator. So no other modulation. Back to the raw kind of PWMing oscillator. Over here, the Rungler. This is what the kind of Benjolin is really known for, and the Benjolin is no different. It's got these sources of randomization, which the modification that I like in here is that it's reflected in these lights. I haven't seen that on all Benjolin modules, and it really should be there because it gives you a really good indication of what's going on. This particular model as well from Gehirn Enterprises has outputs for the different Runglers as well, which sends a gate. Now you'll see at the moment, this orange light, it's got kind of real cool Halloween theme on this one. This orange light is moving very slowly, and that's because the randomized source of bursting stepped voltage is actually clocked internally by oscillator B. So again, that's what makes the Benjolin and the Bean Jelly so wild, is that everything has this weird cross-normalization in some way, shape, or form. So as I turn up oscillator B, you'll see these lights increase in speed. There they go. I've got the filter off, which is why we can't hear anything, or you can probably hear a dull hum. But it's just these oscillators now. And oscillator B is clocking the randomized Rungler. If we turned it up really quick, it'd get nuts. On top of that, oscillator A controls the level of chaos in terms of the distance between each of the randomized stepped voltages is normaled to oscillator A. So you get this wild kind of interaction between speed, and you can think of it as almost like depth. But the thing that makes it so chaotic is because they're normaled. As we turn these up and clock, it's turning up the frequency of the oscillator as well. So we get this madness. That madness is controlled by the level of the Rungler here. This one feeds into oscillator A, oscillator B, and then the filter cutoff here. I'm going to turn oscillator B down a bit so it's less fast. We can see it kind of moving here. Let's open up the filter, and I'll add some of the Rungler to oscillator A. Let's add it to oscillator B, and then the filter. I'll turn the resonance up so we can hear this bubbly, spongy kind of sound. Now let's go a bit harder and let's add some of that cross normalization in here as well. So we get this broken, mangled kind of jelly-like texture, I guess. Let's add a bit of reverb out of sight. So we get this bubbling chaos. Let's turn some of the Rungler off. Cross normalization off. Let's just add the Rungler to the filter. Add it back to oscillator A. So one of the other things that's pretty neat is you can lock by hitting this loop switch. You can lock the last couple of frequencies generated by the Rungler. So let's make this so you can hear it. And I'll lock it using the loop and then change the amount of voltages allowed. So you can hear now it's locked into some of those random frequencies. Change the offset. Whoa. Generate again and lock. Do it again. So you can kind of control some of the randomness. Now if you want a bit more control, what you can actually do, I'm going to take that same oscillator from, LFO from before, from Peaks, and I'm going to use that as a clock source. So now I've got even more control over it. Speed it up. Loop. Speed it up. Cross modulate. Rungler. Resonance. And this works really well. Oh, yep, still going. When we combine it with other elements. So I'm going to pull the clock out and take the clock from my Deluge, which is out of sight. I'll add a little bit of drums to it. Something really simple. Just a really simple 808 pattern. The 4 on the floor. And you'll see that now it is clocked to my Deluge when I hit stop. And play. And now I'll switch off the loop. New loop. Slow it down. So there you have it. The Gehirn Enterprises Benjolin. Get your wildness on.